Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast, where today Rick Mazur, the President and CEO of Forum Energy Metals, is joining us alongside Ken Wheatley, the Vice President of Exploration. And we're going to discuss mostly all things uranium today, but on the exploration and then looking at the commercials before discussing what's going on across Forum's portfolio generally. So, welcome to you both. Rick, we know we speak quite a lot. How are you doing?
Really well today, Mark. Thanks.
Good. And Ken, I know we've had you on the podcast before. It's good to have you back. Are you doing okay?
I'm just fine. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time and for a little bit of a change on this Market Musings podcast. Rather than my usual co-host from Scotland, I have a co-host who is much closer to me geographically in Amsterdam, Elmer. Elmer, welcome. How are you?
Great. Happy to be here. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this. So let's get straight into it. So uranium then, and let's focus on the exploration side of uranium. And Ken, this is where you really know your stuff, I'm told. I think it's a commodity that is perhaps not very well understood, and perhaps doesn't really have a good reputation. But in terms of the actual where it comes from, how it's formed or deposited, can you perhaps start us off by giving us a bit of some context around uranium, where it comes from, and how it's deposited?
Well, there's several types of uranium deposits that occur around the world, and you have the very old ones from what we call the Archean, back before there's any oxygen in the world, actually. And because uranium is such a heavy mineral, it sort of acted like a gold deposits that were formed before there was a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere. And then at a certain time, is about 2.3, 2.4 billion years ago, there's actually enough oxygen in the atmosphere that uranium can be, when it gets oxidized, it can dissolve in water and gets moved around that way. So basically, all the deposits that formed after that point have been transported by water, and then getting into an area where there's a reduced zone, a reduction zone, usually typically with carbon materials, carbonaceous materials, that would allow it to precipitate out. So the Athabasca deposits, for example, the uranium had been dissolved from the surrounding rocks and brought into this huge sandstone basin, washing around in here by these. And then you had these hot, salty fluids in the basin itself that would scavenge this uranium, move it around, and then during the deposition event, bringing along these major structures. And it would get into these carbon-rich areas or these graphitic zones, and typically at a cross-cutting structure, this is where it'd be precipitated out. And we have our high-grade deposits here in the Athabasca because of these big structures and a lot of oxidized fluids moving the uranium around. Younger deposits down in the States, for example, in Kazakhstan, you have the uranium being leached out of the surrounding hills and down into the sandstone basins and then just deposited there in any carbonaceous layers. And again, it's oxidized when it gets brought in, but it gets caught up with any detritus, carbonaceous detritus and stuff. And again, it makes it precipitate out. But you want to get grades of 0.05, 0.1, up to almost 0.5% if you're lucky. Whereas the Athabasca grades, you can range anywhere from 0.5% up to I've seen grades of up to 88% being pulled out in core.
And forgive maybe this silly question, I'm going to ask it anyway, but is the uranium that's currently on Earth, can there ever be any more, or do we have all that we're going to have?
Yeah, pretty well. It's what's here is here. There's nothing more being formed. During the formation of the Earth, you would have had all your metals that you're ever going to get. The only thing you're getting added to the Earth right now would be, nickel iron from any meteorites that are coming down, but that's
Okay.
it. So.
Okay. So what certain factors would influence a quality deposit? Is it the channels that of the rocks and how the uranium can then form a deposit?
Yeah, there's a mixture of things, as there always is. First of all, you want a good source that's easily leachable. You need a transportation system, so you want either rivers or just rainfall or something that's able to leach uranium out of these rocks that are easily leachable. And then you need a decent trap for this to end up in. So the uranium deposits probably would have formed in the Athabasca Basin at lower grades when they're first being moved around, but at the 1.5 billion year event where you had these fluids really moving around in the basin and getting trapped in these structures and the whole sort of a dewatering of the basin, it would have picked up these uranium, remobilized these uranium deposits sort of, and then high graded them at areas of structural complexity. And it's instead of what you have these roll front deposits in the sandstones, and it's sort of living thing. It keeps migrating as you go along. If you come back in 100, 200, 300 years from now, that deposit or that where the uranium has deposited is going to have moved a bit because you've had more oxidized fluids coming in and sort of moving that roll front along. Whereas what happened at the Athabasca deposits, it was a stationary roll front. So every time uranium came out, it kept coming out in the same spot and it wasn't migrating at all. It just sort of sat there, and which is why we have these very high grades with these Athabasca deposits.
Okay, so what do you look for then when you're searching for uranium deposits? I mean, we talk a lot on Stockbox to mining companies, base metals, precious metals, and a lot of the exploration is aerial mag surveys, ground mag surveys, trenching, soil sampling, and of course looking at existing deposits. What can you use to help you find where a good uranium deposit is? What would be the starting point really? Is it looking at the geology?
Yeah, it's always the geology, the starting point. And again, like you said, the best place to look for a deposit is in the head frame of the shadow of the head frame. So we have these models that started up way back when, with these unconformity deposits. So Key Lake, Clough Lake, Rabbit Lake, they're all deposits that were right at surface, and these boulders are spread all over the place. So they were the easy ones to find. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere, so it wasn't that easy, but at least, you had a surface expression of these highly radioactive boulders right at surface. So you can follow them back along the glacial trend and, drill, and there you have your deposit. From there, you come up with a model. You say, well, this is different than what we see from the roll front types. If we're having these really high grades, there's lots of nickel and copper associated with it. And it's on top of this graphitic conductor, which is a nice EM conductor, electromagnetic conductor. So people started using electromagnetics and finding these conductors all over the place. And then you can go a bit deeper, 100 meters, 200 meters, and a whole bunch of deposits were found in the late 70s, early 80s, based on this Key Lake model of EM conductor. And from there, we keep drilling these things, and we start going deeper, and then we start looking further into the basement, and suddenly, in the around the 2000 area, or around the year 2000, we start finding these basement hosted deposits with a different alteration signature, but these mineralization is now quite a ways further down into the basement, and we were always looking at the unconformity. So it's a mixture of geophysics, geochemistry, modeling, and of course the geology. We know to stick around with, for us, for example, we know to stick around the Athabasca Basin because this is where these processes took place, and this is where we want to find our deposits.
Okay, so the Athabasca, then, that is of course where Forum are based. What is a lot? Are there a lot of uranium activities or existing mines in that area?
Oh yes, there's lots of juniors have appeared out of the woodwork. Some of us, there's a few of us juniors that have been around for a long time and have kept at it through the hard times for the last few years. But it's booming again now. And of course, Cameco, Areva, or I should say Orano and Denison. A few of these biggies have been there all the time, and are just they just keep going on their projects.
Okay. And where else in the world then is significant for uranium deposits and also operating mines? You mentioned Kazakhstan, I think, earlier.
Yes, Kazakhstan has some pretty impressive roll front deposits that I know Orano is working on with some of the local companies, and I think it's the largest producer now in the world,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. And again, it's these in situ leach systems that they have going. They pump down fluids into the uranium-rich layers, and then suck the fluids back up again at another spot, and they just take out the uranium. So it's more non-evasive, I guess, other than messing up with the water table. But other than that, you don't have to dig a hole in the ground.
Is that like in situ recovery? Is it a similar idea?
Yes, that's what it is. In situ,
Is what it is.
In situ recovery. Yeah, it's a different name.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, where the solution's pumped down and it's leached and then pulled back up the surface. So, Athabasca, Kazakhstan. Anywhere else that is significant in the world?
Well, Olympic Dam, of course, it's uranium is a byproduct there. It's they're mining for a lot of other minerals, but uranium is there in very low quantity, but it's there, and so they take it out as a byproduct. So that's good. And then there's Africa, of course, and Africa's had a number of uranium deposits, again lower grade, but fairly large deposits.
Okay. So once you've found then your uranium, and of course Forum is in Athabasca, how do you begin exploration? Is it very similar to exploring for other minerals in terms of doing your soil sampling and then doing your drilling, and then I guess you don't assay it, do you? I guess that's different when it comes to uranium.
Oh yeah, we assay it.
You do?
Oh yes, we have to do that to get the exact numbers, and for 43-101s. But
okay,
the nice thing about uranium is as soon as you hit it, it comes out of the hole. It's radioactive, and you know right away. Yes, I've hit something. Unlike some other minerals that we're looking for.
Well, because it comes out when it's this bright yellow. Is that the case? Or?
No, it's usually, the really high grade stuff is more metallic looking. It's
okay.
Black to metallic, and you have these blood red hematite zones around it. It's the oxidized stuff that's usually at surface that is the yellow, because the oxygen's got at it and it's turned into.
Okay. But your Geiger counter starts going crazy basically when you've hit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can remember when we found Sue. It was Sue C. We just got out of the truck. The drill was off to the side. We just got out of the truck, and the scintillometer started going crazy. And we realized, I think we hit something here. So.
Yeah, that's nice. Is it dangerous in its state like that?
Well, it is if you're going to sit on it for a while, if you're going to eat it or do silly things. We get it out and we keep it outside. So it's, so any radon production is being taken away. And you just reduce your amount of time, amount of distance and stuff like that. The lower grades aren't a big deal, but when you start getting to the really high grades at the Athabasca, we're quite careful with it.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a fascinating commodity. I mean, for something that just is radioactive, it's just giving off energy in itself. It's just, I don't know. It's otherworldly almost, isn't it? It's sort of a bit mind blowing. Nothing else really does that. It's a very interesting commodity, but awesome potential as well. So. Yeah, how does the exploration work then? Is it a matter of drilling and really building the picture and then honing in on the deposit, and then you're getting the resource JORC sorted and all the reports, and then moving to mine?
Yes, it's like I said, we use these models, and then what I use is what I call educated intuition. When I'm working on these things, you look at everything from your satellite imagery, you do all your different EM or your different geophysical surveys, and again, that depends on where you are in your with the geology. Gravity works very well around the edge of the basin, but it doesn't work so well in the deep parts of the basin. Resistivity is very expensive, but it seems to pick out the alteration halos. And that's what we use for gravity as well. is it picks out these areas of alteration that are typically associated with the deposit. Mag, you don't want to drill in a mag high, you want to drill in a mag low, preferably right around a mag high. EM conductors, so we use all this kind of stuff. Put a picture together and based on all the other deposits that have been found out there, you sort of narrow it down and say, well, these look like the best areas to go and drill. So that's when you get in there and start drilling. And that's the proof in the pudding, is whatever comes out of the hole there. And sometimes, you can tell, okay, look, it looks like uranium bearing fluids have moved along here. So somewhere along strike, there may be a deposit or a showing or whatever it is. And if it's dead as the doorknob, you say, okay, it doesn't look like anything moved through here. You move on to your next structure or conductor and try and you look for the ones that have the best potential, and that's where you concentrate your work.
And what would a good grade look like? When I've seen news come out from other mining companies, you see they report the grade, 1% copper at X meters, for example. Do you report in a similar way with uranium?
Yes, we do. With the whole, if it's material, if you're a small junior and you've hit something and you don't have the grades yet from the lab, then you have to report, these are the counts that we're getting over a certain distance, because it's material to the company. Unless you shut down your stock and wait till you get the lab results back. But once the lab results come out, then it's going to be X percent over X meters. And
what would be? Is there a point where you say that's very good or that's poor?
There are one hole wonders. You get a spectacular hole and you think, this is it, and you drill all around it and there's nothing else there, and it's very disappointing. But usually you can drill a long strike, and this is where the fun begins. Is how big is this thing going to get? If a bigger company usually takes bigger step outs. A little junior, we're going to take 10 meter, 25 meter step outs, because we want to be able to follow this thing, because they tend to be in a relatively straight line, but they do wiggle around a bit. And if you step out too far, you may lose it and you'd have to go back and figure out where it went to. So typically we do fences along strike, a fence of 2 or 3, 4 holes, whatever it is that is needed. And again, depending on the attitude of the mineralization, is it a skinny little structure in the basement? Is it a flat-lying pancake at the unconformity? It's all quite variable when you're out there.
Okay, and as you've moved down the exploration path and then you build a JORC resource, what would determine something that's potentially a commercial deposit? Are you looking at the size of the resource? Yes,
it would be the size of it. How close is it to surface? Is it going to be an underground mine, or is it going to be open pit? Is it under a lake where you have to do all sorts of silly things to get it out, or go down a shaft from the side and drill under, put a shaft across to get to it? And what else are you going to need to know? How close is it to the nearest mill? How big of a road are you going to have to build to get there? So there's all these equations that you have to throw in to make it viable. But once you find something like that, of course, you approach the big companies, the mining companies, and see if they're interested.
Yeah. And do you have any idea of what kind of size would be something that would be attractive to one of the majors?
Well, again, it depends how close you get to their mill. If it's drivable distance, like our Walston project or Fur Island or Henday Lake, one of these, it would take probably 20, 30 million pounds at the most to make it economically viable, because it's right near their whole system. So they just dig it out and take it back.
Okay. And then what does a uranium mine look like when it's sort of built? Then what's the extract? I suppose it depends on what the rock is underneath, whether you need to be doing lots of heavy excavation work or not. But can you give an idea of what a typical uranium mine might look like and how it would operate?
Well, it's a typical open pit. If anybody's seen any other deposit, it's the same thing. It's just that the trucks are going to be shielded. All the operators are shielded for the radiation, and would have air filters on so they aren't getting radon and dust and things like that. The material gets pulled up, and they have these scanners up top, and it would sort of separate the mineralization into low grade, medium grade, high grade, and then they typically would blend it to make sure it's a certain percentage. Now, the McLean Lake mill, I think they've upgraded it, so it's, I think, the only mill that can just take anything. You throw it in there and it'll process it. Whereas the Key Lake mill, I remember them having to blend it all the time to try and get about a 2% average grade. And like I say, the uranium deposits, because they're so high grade, I think these mills were the only ones in the world that had to downgrade the ore coming in to try and process them because it was so high grade.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then once it's been sorted, it then moves down the line and goes. You make this thing called yellow cake, is that right?
That is correct. It's an oxidized form of uranium that they put into barrels, and they ship these off down to I think it's in Ontario, where they upgrade it. And again, different reactors will use different levels of enriched fuel.
Okay.
So I think the CANDU reactors, you don't have to enrich it quite as much. They're much more relaxed about that kind of thing. Whereas some of the other reactors, you need to really get it up to about 3 or 5%.
Okay. So enriching is what just making it more powerful, is it?
Yeah, you have your two types of uranium. It's the U-238, which is sort of the benign, boring one that's not much use, and then the U-235, and that's one that works well in the reactors.
Okay.
So that's what they want to upgrade is the U-235, and how they enrich it is typically now is through the centrifuges, and they put in the centrifuges. Now the U-238 is going to be just slightly heavier than the U-235, so they put it in these centrifuges and spin it like crazy, and so the 238 ends up on the outside, and the 235 ends up more on the inside, and then they'll take it out and move it to another centrifuge and do the same thing over, and they keep doing this till it's all concentrated.
I see.
So I'm sure you heard about what went on in Iran with their when they got their centrifuges shut down. They're trying to grade it up a little higher than what I guess, I don't know, they're higher than what a reactor would need, and more towards bombs type stuff. So,
more towards bombs, yeah. Okay.
So
okay,
right. those centrifuges that you heard, they shut down they wrote some kind of program, I guess, to shut down all the centrifuges, but that's what they're using to upgrade
I see.
the isotopes.
Okay. And then that is then put into a form, a fuel rod, is it, or a fuel cell? I don't know what it's called. That then goes into the power stations for nuclear power.
That is correct. Yeah.
So, is it what you see that the fuel rod is that just is the nuclear is the uranium just is it just encased in something? Is that all it is? It's just being encased.
It depends again on the reactor, but from what I gather, they make it into these pellets, and you just line these pellets up inside the rods, metal rods, and then you can put the rods into the reactor, and the number of rods, of course, increases the amount of radiation that's going on in there, or helps to get things going up. So,
okay, excellent. Okay,
yeah.
Well, that satisfied a lot of my curiosity. There's still a lot of reading I can do up on it, because it still intrigues me quite a lot. But we are upon nearly 30 minutes there of talking about exploration for uranium. So we should maybe focus on the investment side of it and the commercial side. And of course, Rick, the CEO, is the man for that. And I think Elmer, you've got a few questions.
Yeah, I've got a curious side to this topic. Rick.
No, fire away, Elmer.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Generally, let's say post Fukushima, so after, what are the actual main driving factors for the price of uranium, and how much does just general civilian sentiment towards nuclear power impact that price?
Yeah, so, okay, let's talk about, Fukushima. That shut down all the reactors in Japan. There wasn't a lot of confidence by the Japanese people after that event. So all of a sudden, all their inventory is available to sell to other nuclear reactors, other utilities. So that brought on a huge supply of above ground uranium, which resulted in the closure of the mines in the Athabasca, a reduction in mine production from Kazakhstan. So, yeah, there was excess supply at that time. Well, nuclear reactors around the world need 180 million pounds of uranium per year. So a lot of that above ground uranium and the lack of investment in the uranium sector is starting to turn that supply imbalance down to the demand side. And so that's the supply situation. I think we're finally turning the corner around, and the demand side is picking up because of a number of issues. Number one, the desire to have a carbon-free economy over the next 30 years. Well, how are you going to do that? Nuclear power is finally getting its due. That is a very clean, carbon-free power source which provides baseload energy. The only other baseload energy, and I mean by baseload, I mean constant power. You turn on your light switch, it's not going to flicker because a windmill shut down or because the sun went behind the clouds in some of these renewable energy alternatives, which have their place. But baseload energy is very important. And right now it's being provided by coal, and it's being provided by oil, and it's being provided by natural gas. Well, that's starting to be not acceptable to society now. So the only answer, in my view, is for baseload energy is nuclear power. So I think people are starting to come around to that recognition. In the markets, what's been going on is a number of ETFs have formed, which are buying over $1 billion in stock equities. But more importantly, on the demand side, there's a number of entities actually buying physical uranium. So that's putting huge demand in a hurry here that has really propelled the price recently.
What type of entities, if I can ask that, or if that was purposely not mentioned? What are the physical entities that are buying uranium at this moment that are not the ETFs?
Yeah, so the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust has raised, it was just formed this past summer, and in the last 3 or 4 months have purchased up to 35 million pounds at last time I looked of uranium. $1.3 billion has been raised in total to buy physical uranium in that trust, in anticipation that they'll be able to sell that to utilities down the road. Yellowcake PLC in London there has just announced plans for the purchase of 3 million pounds of uranium, for instance. And Kazatomprom out of the UK, or out of Kazakhstan, has just announced $500 million, these are US dollars, in purchases of physical uranium. So these entities can certainly see an opportunity that there will be increased demand down the road, and an opportunity for them to make some money selling their uranium to utilities.
Yeah, just two questions on the demand side. The first one is just generally on the economics behind nuclear reactors generally. So the thing that I've seen, at least in the Netherlands, and I know that it's also partially true in the US as opposed to, for instance, Asian countries, is that the upfront investment and that the time is needed to build a nuclear reactor up to scale is maybe not fast enough when it comes to the urgency of climate change, at least for consumer sentiment, of course. Do you think that that's a fair characterization or no? Do you think these reactors, for instance, could be built up to scale at a time where it does become, economically viable for governments also to invest in these reactors, or no? What do you think about that?
Well,
Can I jump in on that
building a
one?
nuclear.
Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay. Politics and the anti-nukes. Okay. Down in the States, for example, when they're trying to build a reactor, the anti-nukes would fight it tooth and nail every step of the way and take it to court and say, oh, no, you can't build this part. It's not safe. It didn't get. So it would go to court. It would go through the whole process. They realized, well, yes, actually it was perfectly fine. They go to the next step. Anti-nukes would take it again to court. Oh, we can't do this, can't do that. And so, of course, the reactor, instead of being built in 5 years for $1 billion, now takes 15 years and $5 billion because of the delays in court cases. So it's not fair to say, well, they can't build a reactor on time and on budget because of the legal entities going through it. And one of the problems with the United States when they're building reactors is that everybody has their own reactor design. So, of course, they have to fight every step of the way to get through it. If you use the French model, where they have one or two reactors, and once it's done, nobody can fight about the safety of it anymore. It's they build the same plant through the whole place. Anybody working at a reactor can go move from one to the next place. It's the same thing over and over again. And it's much more efficient, and that's the way to go, is come up with these reactor designs that everybody can use, and it doesn't go through that battle.
Yeah, so because Asian countries, I know China, for instance, can build up these reactors to scale, but then there's obviously people that are going to think, oh, you need more time to do it right, for instance. But yeah, I guess. But do you think those legal hurdles will actually change then in the U.S.? Because that's probably pretty sorely needed over the next 20 years.
Yeah, well, like say,
time?
If the government gets involved and or they come up with a guaranteed reactor design and stick with it and not keep changing it or modifying it, then it can't go to court. It'll be just the battles over where are they going to build it type thing. It's the usual, and not my backyard. Who wants a nuclear reactor in their backyard type thing. But that'll be the battles for that part. But if people are yelling for electricity and and no carbon, well, then this is going to be a stepping stone. As far as I'm concerned, it's a stepping stone until they come up with hydrogen fusion or something that works on a even cleaner down the road. So,
just one more.
So I think the sentiment is changing in the United States, Elmer. Yeah. Recently I noticed that in Illinois they're going to be keeping some reactors online that supposedly were supposed to be taken offline. Mm-hmm. You got to remember when these things were engineered back in the 70s, they were really over-engineered, and their lives are being extended quite a bit, and so the sentiment I think is changing in the United States. Tell me how we're going to plug in all these vehicles. All these electric vehicles. You plug your vehicle in, and you're getting the power from an oil power generating station or a coal generating station. Well, that's not very green, is it? That's the people are once they realize that that's where this power is coming from, it's going to take a while for sure. But as you pointed out, China's going gung-ho, 150, new power plants. They've just announced during these COP discussions, $440 billion investment in nuclear power. So, we better start coming around to their way of thinking here pretty quick in the Western world. And I think they are in Europe. I don't know, you can maybe comment on that, Mark.
I don't know. I don't really have a feel for nuclear power over in Europe. I don't know. Elmer, maybe do you have a feel? Or?
Yeah, I think the sentiment is actually the same, exactly what you say with, for instance, okay, you close nuclear reactors and then demand, you still need energy. If you don't want the energy demand to fluctuate, and then you can't supply that energy. So Germany still has to rely on coal in many cases, whereas France, for instance, is primarily on nuclear power. And I do think people, I know in the Netherlands, recently was a political discussion, which is that exactly the talking point that I just gave, which is that, it's not economically viable, or it'll take too much time. And then by the time it is, then the practicality of it, but then maybe that was just, again, a political talking point. But I guess this is an open question for both, because then what you are banking on then, right, is that humans need a constant energy supply, and nuclear is something that runs 24/7, as opposed to wind and solar power that can fluctuate due to weather conditions, for example. And I think, just to use the term that Ken also used, the anti-nukes, that they're all banking, for instance, on battery technology, right? So because if battery technology gets good enough and you can store energy, then you don't need to really worry about large fluctuations in the grid, because you have the energy already stored. Would it be safe to say that that's kind of almost too optimistic, and that probably won't be a thing? And if it were to be a thing, do you think that would also influence against the sentiment on the utility of nuclear power, or no? Just an open question.
Well, listen, I mean, battery storage technology is really kind of at its infancy in terms of commercial applications. I mean, vanadium redox batteries are only just starting to be tested as a viable storage of power from renewables. I don't think that's the answer to baseload energy concerns. I really believe that if we're going to cut back on power generation by fossil fuels, mainly coal, what are you going to replace it with? You can replace it with natural gas, which is a carbon emitter. Admittedly, not as much of a carbon emitter as coal or oil. We shouldn't be burning oil to generate power, anyways. That's really old school. But that's really the only alternative for baseload energy. I think people are coming around to understand that it is going to take 30 to 40 years to make this transition. So we got to start really thinking about building nuclear power now. I think that's the kind of renaissance that I believe we're in right now with regards to nuclear power.
Yeah. So just to put more concrete spin on this one last question, is it safe to say that there's almost just kind of an inflection point, decisive moment that you guys are waiting for when it comes to demand for nuclear power, at least as people also wake up a little bit more to the need for that energy source in the wake of climate change? Or is it just a slow crawl, so to speak?
An inflection point. You mean what kind of a catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, for example, you mentioned COP. I would almost feel like that could be almost a good enough, just insert government wants to, for instance, subsidize nuclear reactors more so, for example, in the future. Are there specific milestones where you think that's going to upcoming, and then the demand for nuclear power increases? And
I think it's going to be gradual. The European Commission has deemed that nuclear power is sustainable in its taxonomy on the environment, and I think we're turning the corner very, very slowly here over the next few years while there's dialogue. You can't pick up the paper any day of the week without talking about the green economy and the electrification of the world. And listen, if all that, I know here in Canada, an engineering firm did a study of to meet 2050 the 2050 targets, we're going to need 3 times the electrical power generation to make that happen. People haven't thought this through very clearly. So nuclear power is probably one of the most, it's going to take time to build reactors, but when they're up and running, and these Gen 4 reactors have very high safety factors built into them, I think that's what we're going to be seeing 30 years from now. There's also the small modular reactor renaissance that's happening here too, which I think is a very interesting concept, and I know that the UK is studying this very closely.
Now, I hope you're to a certain extent right, because for instance in New York there was just recently a nuclear reactor closed, and that was no, not just recently, but a couple of years ago, that was a really big political achievement for Cuomo, the governor, when he closed that. And you think of the next 20 years to get that sentiment to change almost. I hope it's not too steep of a climb, but maybe it's maybe we should move on to.
Well, the U.S. still has the most nuclear reactors in the world, and as I mentioned, I see that recently Illinois power utility there extended the life of I think 2 of their reactors. So that's certainly going to be something that's going to happen on the demand side. Is you're going to see these nuclear reactors extending their lives. We've got the new build in China, which is huge. And we've got this small modular reactor sort of discussion going on here that makes a lot of sense, because those reactors can generate about 300 megawatts of power, various designs, and the deleterious elements from those small modular reactors is minute, really. So that's an interesting future demand for uranium as well.
Mark, did you want to interject on that, or?
The only thing, I'd just like to just come in on just the prices, Rick, and what's going on with the pricing of uranium, and it did go through I think, did it have a very good time? Was it sort of a few years ago? Then it really came back, and then came off, and then sort of ran up again. What do you think's been driving the prices? And is it fair to say we're almost where we are now, which is I don't want to say it's all-time highs, but it's certainly up around that area. Would that be the new base level, would you say?
Yeah. So on the supply side, after Fukushima, there was a lot of inventory above ground that had to be worked through. Utilities were buying that inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elmer talked about an inflection point. Well, in this supply demand scenario, the inflection point is that we're getting pretty damn close to meeting that supply-demand balance
Mm.
here by using up all of the above-ground uranium and no production
Okay.
essentially coming out of the ground.
There's going to be a supply crunch.
So these Yellowcake, Kazatomprom, and the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust understand those dynamics, and they're buying up the uranium at an average of say $40 a pound, and they aren't buying that so that they can sell it at $20 a pound.
Mhm.
They're buying it because eventually utilities are going to want to maintain their security of supply for these nuclear reactors, and they're going to have to sign term contracts for say $60, $80 US a pound.
Mhm.
So that I think that's what's going on here.
Okay, so the future is bright or yellow, let's say, for uranium prices, in your opinion.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's no question.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Good. Excellent. Well, it puts Forum then in potentially a very strong position. And if we just finish off by, of course, talking about what it is that Forum have in the portfolio, you have a number of uranium projects, and you released some news just today, I believe, across the uranium projects. You're going to be drilling, or you've applied for a permit to drill at Wollaston. You've also applied for a drilling permit at the Northwest Athabasca joint venture. And at Fur Island, you've been looking to do a resistivity survey, I think, early next year. So maybe just bring us up to speed. It looks like you've got a good work program sort of being planned at the moment on your uranium projects. Is that right?
yeah, Ken, do you want to go through that with Mark and Elmer?
Yeah, we'll go through that quickly here. We've had to move our focus away a little bit from uranium while I was in the dumps there, but now that it's back and strong, we've kept our position in the Athabasca Basin with our projects, and now bringing them back on board. So, and I've actually picked up a couple more projects in the last little while here. So, yeah, we're planning for to finish off our gravity survey, and then followed by a drill survey, a drilling program at Wollaston. And this is one of our newer projects we picked up. It was let go by another junior who just couldn't wait around long enough for the uranium price to come back. So I was quite happy to pick up that ground. And like I say, it's just 10 kilometers south of the Rabbit Lake Mill. It's the road actually goes up that runs to Rabbit Lake, and McLean Lake Mills runs actually right through the property. So it's it's nice and close to the both Rabbit and McLean Lake Mills. Shallow, just outside the basin, and has had historic work done it for quite a few years, mainly in the 70s, early 80s. There's been a bit of drilling on it since then on some other targets, but what I've picked up for the most part, or what I'm concerned, is the most potential for uranium deposits, where we have these nice EM conductors running through the property and getting caught in these structures and getting to these big bends. And so I'm doing a gravity survey. Want to finish that off to look for the alteration halos, and then get in with the drill program in this winter coming up.
In this winter, okay.
So here,
go on, Rick.
So here's the thing, Mark. Ken here is not. He's worked 40 years in the Athabasca Basin, and this particular part where the Wollaston project is very prolific for uranium deposits. And Ken actually discovered 3 deposits in the area.
I was on the exploration team. I'm not going to say I'm the guy who did it, but it's a team when you get in there, right? So it's
absolutely, yeah. The Sioux deposits in Midwest A. Anyways, I think Ken has a pretty good understanding of the structural setting in this part of the basin, and as I said, it's quite prolific. There's a lot of little deposits there. And Orano and Denison just announced a pilot study that they've done at the McLean Lake mine where they're using this SABRE technology, surface access borehole resource extraction. That's what the acronym stands for. Basically, they drill a hole. They use water jets to blow the uranium back up to surface, and they collect it. And this is turning out to be a very viable, environmentally friendly extraction technique for near surface smaller ore bodies. So that's what has me excited about our Wollaston project, is that, this kind of technology is going to start being used by Orano and Denison.
Okay.
And if we clock into an interesting deposit at Wollaston, this is something that's certainly viable.
Right. Okay. And you've got your roadmap set out then, have you? It looks like you have a winter drilling program planned, both at Wollaston and at Fur Island, but Northwest Athabasca a bit later on. Is that right?
Yeah, Fur Island is going to be the resistivity survey. We tried to get that done last year. The weather did not cooperate. It was just it was a bit too warm for good ice conditions. So but the resistivity survey is showing a very nice alteration system opening up along that Cathy fault of ours, heading up towards another major fault, and that have got Orano quite interested in it as well. So this year we just Orano's plan is to get the resistivity survey done and then, move on from there. So that's where Fur Island is sitting at. Northwest Athabasca, we had to prioritize, is it going to be Wollaston or Northwest? And because of the proximity to the mine site with Wollaston, we decided, okay, I know I've got beautiful targets at Maurice Bay. I'm really excited to get back in there again. But we've had to pull out the camp and clean things up in there a bit. And we fully intend to go back in next year to get at a couple of these targets that I keep hounding Rick to give me the money so I can get in there and drill.
Okay.
now we have the money is coming now, so but we have to distribute it properly. So we decided Wollaston first, and then we'll get back to Northwest Athabasca second.
Right. Okay. And Northwest Athabasca will be 2023 winter season. Is that the plan?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a longer lead time on that, but of course you're not just limited to uranium projects, are you? You've of course got your copper and nickel projects to be putting some money in the ground on as well. So yeah, I'm sure it's a very well thought out process to get the best bang for your buck. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much covers everything. We're coming up just on an hour. Thank you very much, Ken, for talking to us at length about uranium deposits. I think people will find that interesting, and Rick on more of the commercial side and the future being nuclear, and just bringing us up to speed on of course the plans of the uranium project exploration. And I'm sure we'll be talking again as and when you mobilize for the winter drill program, and or shortly after the program, and we can talk about results. But I think for now, I think it's covered everything that I was going to cover. Unless there's any final thoughts from Elmo, do you have anything to come in, or are you good?
No, it was a pleasure. I found it very interesting. Great.
Yeah, I'd like to make a plug for Bjorn Lomborg.
Who's Bjorn Lomborg?
It's Bjorn Lomborg. Apparently, he's an environmental economist, and he's looking at what the policies at what's going on at the COP26 or whatever it's called in Glasgow, and he's saying it's just not feasible. What they're coming up with is of shutting down oil and gas and stuff. He says you can't do that. It's going to ruin the economies, and they're just esoteric, right?
It's totally obvious.
Yeah, and he's going on about this is how you're going to have to do it, and he's looking at it from an economic point of view, and is one of the few environmentalists out there who I can look at and say this guy makes sense. He's so as I say, his name is Bjorn Lomborg, and Lomborg, and would recommend people take a look at his stuff to put nuclear power into perspective, and the silliness that is going on right now with this whole carbon dioxide.
Yeah, another person I liked was James Lovelock. I know we've mentioned him before, Rick, haven't we? UK guy. There's a video out there when he talks about Gaia. And it's very interesting. He mentions nuclear power, and it actually changed my perception completely on nuclear power. So again, James Lovelock's another good one to.
Well, actually in his book, in The Revenge of Gaia, I believe he actually states in his perfect world, the world would be powered by nuclear, and we'd all be driving around in electric vehicles. That was his perfect world. In somewhere in the book, I remember reading that. Saying,
it does.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Well, Rick Mazur and Ken Wheatley from Forum Energy and Metals, thank you both very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the podcast, Mark and Elmer.
No problem. Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Ben and Russell. Tune in next time.